deep uncertainty, and pivotal shifts, traps to be avoided, right choices to be made. Join me, Tian Wei, for answers from the Swiss Alps with brilliant minds and key players. A world in change. A World Insight Special on the World Economic Forum 2019.
The Belt and Road Initiative has been generating a lot of excitement at Davos. On the sidelines of the Davos Forum, World Insight anchor Tian Wei spoke to a diverse panel on the global outlook of the Belt and Road Initiative.
Then it will be easier for business.
从中国改革这40年的经验来看，
发展中国家跟发达国家有很多区别。
Adopt a long-term lens in looking at infrastructure.
Our diverse panel reflects the global outlook of the project. We have Xu Niansha, chairman of the China Poly Group, Heng Swee Keat, Singapore's Minister of Finance, Ilham Aliyev, president of Azerbaijan, and Wang Yongqing, vice chairman of the All China Federation of Industry and Commerce. But the ambitious project faces challenges in tackling debt, supporting sustainable development, and uniting a fractured international community. How can the government and private sectors harness the risks to guarantee the $1.5 trillion investment will succeed in kickstarting development and growth?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the session concentrating on the Belt and Road Initiative. The official title for the session is called Advancing the Belt and Road Initiative, China's $1 trillion Vision. Well, the title as it is, I'm sure the four gentlemen sitting on the stage later is going to explore for us some very different perspectives about the Belt and Road Initiative from their own stories. My name is Tian Wei. I'm a moderator and host coming from China Global Television. It's a pleasure to see you here. And may I say, you are really the fortunate ones. You get inside. Since I arrived in Switzerland, the one outside this door is the biggest crowd I've seen. They say all the roads lead to Rome. And I guess for this time, all the roads lead to Davos. And that's why we are here. Roads are extremely important. That's why infrastructure has become such a focus for national development for many countries. And we have four distinguished panelists with us, coming from all over the world, helping us to understand whether Belt and Road Initiative and related projects could be a way for them and their countries and their industries to look at for the future. May I have the honor to introduce, first of all, the four gentlemen sitting on the stage. Ilham Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Mr. President, good to see you. On the left, Mr. Wang Yongqing, Vice Chairman from the All China Federation of Industry and Commerce. Welcome, sir. Thank you. Then we have Mr. Xu Niansha, the Chairman of Poly Group from the People's Republic of China. Welcome, Mr. Xu. Last, but certainly not least, we have Minister Heng Swee Keat, who is the Minister of Finance from Singapore. Mr. Minister. Welcome to the four of you. So let's jump directly into the questions. I'm sure our audience has much smarter questions than mine, but I guess we have to start with mine. So let me ask you one thing. Seek truth from facts. That's what I learned as a Chinese. 实事求是. 40 years, China's reform and opening up really depend on one of those principles. That's one of those for success. So let's begin with you, Mr. President. What does Belt and Road Initiative mean for a neighboring country like Azerbaijan? I know you have been devoting your country's economy not only in oil, natural gas, but also building infrastructure.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Creation of modern infrastructure is one of the main objectives of our government, and taking advantage of our geographical location, we, I think, did the right thing to invest largely in infrastructure with respect to internal infrastructure and infrastructure which will allow Azerbaijan to become one of the international transportation hubs. We are investing largely in the infrastructure inside the country with respect to roads construction, highways, airports, gasification, power generation, and also we largely invested in the transportation infrastructure which allow us to transport cargoes from east to west, west to east, and also north to south and south-north. Azerbaijan is an active member of East-West Transportation Corridor initiative. We definitely support One Belt, One Road initiative of Chinese government. And Azerbaijan also provides facilities for countries which are situated to the north and to the south of Azerbaijan to join this project. And we already see it. And Azerbaijan is the only country which is member of East-West and North-South Transportation Corridor. For that, we spend a lot of money modernizing our railroad system, building one of the biggest seaports on the Caspian shore, which is capable to transport up to 25 million tons of cargo, building the missing part between Europe and Asia, which is particularly Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railroad, which connects us with Turkey and then down to Europe, and providing good accommodation and good tariff policy for those who want to use our road.
I see.
And the number of cargo through us is growing. Only North-South Transportation Corridor last year transported 10 times more cargo than the year before.
I have to confess, I used to have an interview with Mr. President. He remembered all the numbers. So he only explored a very small proportion of them with you right now. Later, we'll see, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Let me go to you, Mr. Wang. Wang 先生. 一带一路.
Mr. Wang, so Road and Belt Initiative, many people are talking about it. However, many are not sure and clear on what exactly Belt and Road Initiative is and what kind of opportunities it represents. Of course, this is a new concept, and it has been there for only 5 years. However, if you look at the ancient Silk Road from the Chinese history, you can see that it is not born out of nowhere. It has a heritage. It comes from our history. It comes from our past. Mr. Wang, perhaps you could explain to us, to such an international audience, what exactly is Belt and Road Initiative?
我们这个叫做中国最大的一个民间商会，联系企业家的商会，在他们的印象。
In my impression, we're the largest industry and commerce association representing civil society in China. From what I see, the public perceive this initiative as an opportunity for opening and reform in China. We want to open up China, open our door wider to the world. It's also a way, an opportunity, a platform for China's opportunities with the world's enterprises and companies. Over the past 5 years, we've seen wide recognition from many different countries. According to our statistics, there are 120 countries being involved in this initiative, and over 30 international organizations that are participating. There are over 180 memorandum which have been signed. That shows recognition, and it's indeed so that for private businesses, for civil society, we're seeing many concrete examples related to the Belt and Road Initiative. For example, Mr. Li Fu, who was the former president of the World Bank, he actually led the project to construct an industrial city in Ethiopia in Africa, producing leather-related goods, leveraging the low-cost labor market, accounting for 50% of the local economy. And the entrepreneur who started this project has been named Entrepreneur of the Year by their president and will also attract $1 billion that will be put into this project to increase employment and opportunity for the local people. We're seeing these projects in many different areas in the world, coming from different sectors, coming from different players.
这些包括家电行业都引进去了，非常好的效益。
徐总，请教您。
So, Mr. Xu, well, you coming from a state-owned business, I believe that many leaders of the state-owned enterprises are also present here today from China. I would therefore especially like to ask that this Belt and Road Initiative represents what kind of opportunities and obligations for state-owned businesses, for stakeholders that's related to the state.
那么作为央企来讲呢，我们是这个央企也好，民企也好，就是个企业。
As I said, although we are a state-owned business, we are still a business enterprise. And as a company, we have to rationally utilize our resources. We are of such a nature and an organization to maximize the social and economic benefits. The Belt and Road Initiative have reflected the economic development and historical development of China, and we believe that through this initiative, we will optimize and complement our resources. And just as the President of Azerbaijan has mentioned, these north-south, east-west corridors. Of course, I don't want to advertise ourselves, but we have indeed conducted many exchanges along the Belt and Road Initiative. If I was to share a case with you, I saw the Sheikh Mohammed in Abu Dhabi. I said, don't look at me in this suit. Look at me 40 years ago. Back then, we needed a ticket to get food. It was a very different society. The prince said, you're right. In Abu Dhabi, we have the best hotels. But 20 years ago, we didn't have anything. We had a very low birth rate. And even when children were born, we weren't sure if they would live to adulthood. And over the past 20 years, we have seen a lot of changes. That's why we think there is a lot of similarities between China and my country. Therefore, I think nowadays, companies not only concentrate on performance, but also the culture of these companies, the long-term development of the companies. And we want to have the satisfaction of our customers. Why in the Belt and Road Initiative do we need to focus on the obligation and responsibilities of our companies? These companies work to build a friendship between different peoples. For example, all our manufacturing. The ultimate goal is to provide better goods and services to improve the livelihood of peoples. Actually, China has gone through this kind of experience. We do know what people need. That's why we can do a better job in cooperation.
也更有这个经验和能力来大家很好的合作。我觉得作为一个企业来说呢，企业的工作者吧，我是这种体会。
Minister Heng.
Yes.
From Singapore's perspective, earlier Mr. Xu talked about the shared past in a way, shared past experiences and shared aspirations. That's why, as he believes, a lot of people and countries are interested in the Belt and Road. But what about for Singapore?
I think many of us in this room believe in globalization, believe in the value of free trade. And whether it is the historical past or the more recent 50 years of trade and investment, trade has been a great enabler of growth. And in particular, reform and opening up in China in the 40 years that Deng Xiaoping started this has a tremendous impact on economic growth. And the reform and opening up are actually two sides of the same coin. Because in order to have reform, you need to open up. Because opening up provides an external pressure for the companies to really do better. And in turn, the opening up stimulates reform, and reform allows China to open up further. And this applies to all countries. So that actually brings up two very important aspects of the Belt and Road Initiative which we need to pay attention. First is, it's easy to talk about reform and opening up for all countries and that free trade benefits people, but in practice, free trade has its winners and losers. And that is why we are seeing Brexit, we are seeing the election of President Trump. These are people who felt that free trade has left them behind, and therefore they need somebody to oppose this. And this is a very important phenomenon of how do we make adjustments to ensure that free trade do benefit our people. And I think all of us in every country will need to do our own, if we want to continue to open up, we need to do our reform. And the structural changes that we need to make in our own economy is going to be fairly significant. And in Singapore, we just started for 2 years now an industry transformation plan. It's a major economic restructuring that we think we need to do. So that's the first thing, that reform and opening up and Belt and Road Initiative, free trade and globalization are all interlinked concepts. The underlying concept is that we can all have a better life if we cooperate, if we pursue win-win gains. But reaching there is not a given. we need a lot of hard work to work towards that objective. We need to work together. The second point is that when the President mentioned about connectivity, again, this is a very important aspect of it. Indeed, that global connectivity is key. Today, we cannot think of trade investments without the transport connectivity, air, sea, land transportation, and so on. So, if we look at Belt and Road Initiative as a very major infrastructure project has its own very special economic logic, because some aspect of it can be realized by the private sector without government intervention, because the economics of it is that I can charge for it. So for instance, if the connectivity is about building more telecommunications connectivity. Today when we travel, we have roaming all over, right? And it is not any one government that built that infrastructure. Right. We all pay for it and it works. So that is a very different economics from if we build a road. Because if we build a road, I've seen so many projects in the past, when some economies were trying to build that you end up with roads to nowhere. And the linkages of the road and the economic activity is going to be key. So one example is that Singapore has worked with Vietnam to build this Vietnam-Singapore Industrial Park. And there, besides building industrial park, it's also about building the connectivity for exports and also building the training for the workers so that if the workers have a job even after when the factories are set up. So very complex dimension, but I would agree with all that has been said, that it is a serious vision which need to be pursued vigorously.
However, it seems that you are talking about some of the signs of challenges for an infrastructure project. You said it in such a politically gentle way. But I think you're talking about several issues. For example, a debt issue. For example, multiple players, whether they're really going to have multiple wings. For example, short-term investment vis-a-vis long-term vision. For example, how are we going to see a very fair process of how eventually the results are being allocated among different players? I think these are all questions. I'm sure you also have been thinking about the answers. Well, the industrial park is a park, but connectivity is a bigger project. So we want to have some of your wisdom later, Mr. Minister, about all of this. So let's talk about the debt. I come to you, Mr. President, because you faced that issue many, many times. If I didn't remember it wrong, about 10 years. You have to answer many questions about debts to a lot of people coming from all over. What about that? Infrastructure, debt, almost equals to debts.
Well, as far as the infrastructure is concerned, we financed it mainly from our state budget. I think we managed to properly channel the revenues we get from oil and gas sales to invest into infrastructure so that now we can be proud of it. And according to Davos World Economic Forum assessment, with respect to the quality of roads, Azerbaijan is number 34 in the world. Of course, it led to creation of a better business climate, because when you have modern infrastructure, when you have electricity, gasification, good roads, highways, then it will be easier for business
common sense. Yeah.
To invest.
I know you have a lot of beautiful result numbers to share with us. However, the process leading to the result is not necessarily always smooth. That's why I asked you about the debt issue, because you have been also accused by many others about building debt as a result of building infrastructure. So would you like to share with others about how you see the investment vis-a-vis the debt, and eventually how the issue can be resolved from your perspective?
Our strategy always was for many years that we should spend less than we earn. Our foreign debt is only 19% of our GDP, 19. As I said before, all the infrastructure projects which we implemented in Azerbaijan and projects related to connectivity, as I said, connection between Azerbaijan and neighboring countries with the railroad, were done without borrowing. And we reduced the borrowing. We borrowed a lot 20 years ago when we were not developed, when we were poor. we had to borrow, and we're grateful to those financial institutions which lended money. Now we lend money. Now Azerbaijan has a strategy of not only investing in other countries, also in infrastructure.
Professor Schwab, at the opening ceremony, he was talking about a phenomenon we have in this world, that we are so much dragged by the so-called daily crisis management that we are losing our sight of the long-term thinking. And you are exactly advocating that when you're talking about infrastructure. But Minister Heng, since you have some very different sophisticated views about also these issues, Minister Heng is looking long-term, even about infrastructure, too much a luxury today.
No, on the contrary. The very nature of infrastructure project is that these are long-term. You don't build a road and say, well, tomorrow I will use it for one day. It's going to be used for many, many years. And for that very reason, I think we need to adopt a long-term lens in looking at infrastructure. And earlier on I mentioned about understanding the nature of infrastructure. There are some infrastructure which are much more, I would say, public. It's more like a public goods. In fact, in the past, the department in Singapore that was in charge of infrastructure was called the Department of Public Works, because when you build roads, airports, seaports, and so on, the benefits are not going to be only for one group of people. In fact, it's for the whole country, and it is not just for 1 or 2 years, but for a very long time. So you need long-term thinking on that, and that's what makes infrastructure so difficult, because it is very hard to think long-term, and when you think longer term, the nature of infrastructure project becomes more and more difficult, especially with very rapid technological changes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's also the governance issue, right? You see the election cycle.
Absolutely.
You also see now there is not necessarily that much optimism about the potential growth engines of the world economy.
Yes.
So particularly now, Mr. Minister, how do you look at the infrastructure? I mean, Belt and Road is only one of those examples. It is a wonderful example of that, how we think about infrastructure these days. So with all of these complicated factors coming in, what about that balance? Especially, for example, debts, for example, multiplayer win-win.
Right.
How do you see that, Mr. Minister, briefly?
Well, I'll say that there are three things in infrastructure projects, whether it's Belt and Road or any other infrastructure projects, that we need to bear in mind. First is economic viability. At the end of it, does it yield some returns? Now, the returns can be a return in a commercial sense, or it can be a return in a public sense, because many of the public infrastructure that President spoke about is going to bring benefit to the whole country. Number two, wherever possible, it should be made bankable and investable. Simply because infrastructure projects throughout the world, and in particular for Asia, are so big that it is not possible for any government to do so. So the third part of it is that the projects need to be properly structured, including legally. Because if you have proper legal rules about this, and proper dispute settlement mechanism, you can then take a project that has gone into trouble for proper dispute settlement. Singapore has proposed, the mediation, and so there's going to be a set of international rules on mediation. We have arbitration with international commercial courts, and we are getting our lawyers to look at working with the World Bank to look at standardized contracts, because all these long-term investments, in order to give investors some confidence that these are not going to be changed tomorrow, that I will honor whatever that I sign, we need that long-term thinking.
Okay.
And part of the long-term thinking is having proper legal agreements.
There are a lot of experiments these days.
Yes.
Belt and Road Initiative is only one of them.
Indeed.
There are other infrastructure initiatives raised by many other governments and multiple players. So there seems to be much more new players than what the system was about earlier. So that's an interesting thing, isn't it? So let me go to you, Mr. Xu, responding, 回应一下刚才
So, Mr. Xi, perhaps you could respond to the challenges and practice that have been proposed by the minister, and perhaps the experience and lessons that you could share with us. So you as an entrepreneur, how would you look at this practice, this new initiative, new methodology, and new discussions?
我是觉得这个发展中国家跟发达国家有很多区别。
Just to simply answer your question, I think developing countries are quite different from developed countries. The practice is the experience that has just been learned from China very recently. For developed countries, they have gone through this path decades ago, so it's very far from them. So they don't have it in their memory. And China has a very special social system. China has come a long way. We have seen through the past 3 decades, we have lifted several hundred million out of poverty. In terms of what the minister just proposed in terms of the debt settlements, the dispute settlement mechanism, in fact, debt is a very important issue for us. And for Chinese businesses, it is a chief concern. Of course, debt plays an important role in our economy. However, when conditions are proposed before certain debts, we would have to consider many different factors for state-owned businesses. Perhaps we have a different management style. Every year, we have an annual meeting. They would then share what are the key priorities for state-owned companies. For example, in clean energy, real estate, infrastructure, etc. The common ground for all these sectors is the risk control under the Belt and Road Initiative. We have to take care of the debt and liabilities. So how did you discuss this? We have to set the parameters and maintain control over those liabilities and debt to make sure they are under control of those parameters. So no matter what conditions we are met with, you would have to conduct research, due diligence, and make sure you are not exceeding those parameters. In any project, we have generational impacts. Therefore, we have to take on that responsibility when we face the next generation. So we have a very comprehensive risk control mechanism. If we could implement this perfectly, of course things would turn out very well. But of course, there will always be things that go wrong. First, that is what risk means. Of course, when we drive, we abide by the rules, but there will always be accidents. Therefore, risk control and management is of such great importance to us. Innovation, new experiments try very hard to work with all these different countries to pursue developments. But on the other hand, we are taking in the notes of the importance of controlling these risks.
要特别坚定地控制风险，避免造成了不光是企业的损失，对人家国家的人民和政府的负责。
Belt and Road Initiative, do you have any vision on that?
Well, I can share an experience with you. It's also related to infrastructure. I will talk about risks from that example. I used to work for the railway company in China 20 years ago. We talked about the high-speed railway from Beijing to Shanghai. Everyone was very much concerned with the risk management of that route. It sparked many discussions, and they said it was not an effective investment. It's not worth the trouble. However, 20 years later, looking back, we can see that it was constructed 10 years ago, and it's been in operation for 7 years. We also see that it's most efficient and beneficial economically and socially for China, and it will hold an IPO very soon. I remember we see that Japan has similar examples, and they've gone through a much more complex process in building their infrastructure. But indeed, we've seen clear beneficial results. So we have to choose the right project. We have to measure the performance and result of the projects. Risks don't stem from those projects themselves, they come from people and other factors. So we should really take into consideration all benefits, social benefits, economic benefits, short-term and long-term, so that the companies have a very stable environment to operate in.
All of them, the 4 gentlemen on the stage, are coming from very different backgrounds, and their life experience is very different. So you see they all have their own structure of analyzing things, and how should we find a common ground among them? It's a fascinating thing. And these are only 4 of them. We have a lot of you sitting there. So that's why let's open it to the floor. Because there are smarter questions, I always believe, from those sitting out there. But before we start, I have to let Mr. Xiao to come in first. I know you don't want to talk. You want to just sit there and watch the other 4 gentlemen talk about the topic that you're interested in. But you have to talk because you're here, Mr. Xiao. Mr. Xiao Yaqing is the director of SASAC. That is the commission that's responsible for China's biggest state-owned enterprises.
Many people mentioned economic reforms, and last year China marked the 40th anniversary of opening up and reform, and this year China will mark the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the People's Republic of China. Right now, SOEs, they will have to play a very important role both in economic reform and opening up, but as well as they play a very important role in BRI. So how do you balance these two roles?
Because we are talking about a very broad subject, I have to say economic reform has created a lot of economic opportunities for China. And even 10 years ago, we couldn't imagine China would develop to this stage. So we really benefited from reform and opening up. The BRI itself is a further opening up to the world, not just domestically. So be it SOEs or private companies, they want performance. They want efficiency. We heard from President Aliyev the efficiency for infrastructure development. But in the end, we all want to achieve great performance. Secondly, the BRI is a long-term project. For companies, you need to strike a balance between long-term development and short-term interest and short-term reward. If you don't think you can strike a balance immediately, you can wait a bit before participating in the BRI. It really is mutually beneficial. It is not that Chinese companies are sacrificing themselves. Chinese companies benefit from their investments too. All these projects, everyone is involved from all different sides. Therefore, I like to stress BRI is not about Chinese companies or China. It is a very open, it's an open initiative, open to the world. And it will be operated with the rule of law.
I don't think that we should call our title China's 3 trillion vision. I think it should be
Great topic, because it's not just China, I hope, and it's not. So let's open it to the floor, because it's not just China. We're going to have people coming from all over the world to ask questions. Let's ask these questions together, then we'll have the answers coming from our panelists. How about that? That would save some time. No, this lady first.
So we have seen the investments in the Belt and Road Initiative increase by 50% in the last 5 years. Yes. My question is, will this rise continue given the restrictions that Chinese companies are facing in the US and in Europe?
Thank you for that question. The gentleman here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I came from China Energy, the largest China energy company in the world.
Okay, a brief question.
Okay, the question is to you, Your Excellency, the President Aliyev. I know that you focus on your infrastructure in the transportation, but my question is, how about this power infrastructure, including the grid and the power supply? Because we're the largest one. I just look for, is it any potential opportunities for me to give some infrastructure? Thank you very much.
That's a very pragmatic question, I have to say. That gentleman over there, yes, please. Briefly, a question?
Claude Bigley from the Parliament of Switzerland. To which extent is the Belt and Road Initiative an infrastructure project? To which extent is it also a political foreign relation togetherness project?
Okay. Last but not least, this lady, finally your turn.
My name is Lena. I'm from Singapore, but I'm working in Thailand for Amata Group.
Yes.
My question is, we have heard a lot about the China and the US tension. So will this tension drive the Belt and Road Initiative towards the slower lane or the faster lane? Thank you very much.
Okay. Can we have the four of you to answer some of them? First of all, pragmatic question. I mean, nobody else can pick that up.
Okay. With respect to power generation, we invested largely. Now we reduce completely the deficit. We are a net exporter of electric energy and earn tens of millions of dollars. We are open for investments. We also invite companies to be contractors. This year only we will commission new power station of the power will be 400 megawatt. And of course we are working now on efficiency, on reduction of losses. So from a pragmatic point of view, I will be happy if you come and be our partner as investor, as a contractor in any capacity. And also would like to touch upon the question from the Swiss Parliament. I am absolutely sure that any kind of transportation projects which connect countries, they have geopolitical background. and they positively influence geopolitical situations, stability, predictability, because it creates interdependence. We cannot be a transitor without neighbors. Our neighbors cannot be transitor without their neighbors. Therefore, this is a chain of countries. And coming back to what I said before, we are on the road from east to west and north to south. So we connect continents and countries and create more predictable future.
Thank you, sir. China-US, maybe.
Well,
Since Singapore has always been the hub in between.
Well, I think it depends on what kind of investments are you looking at, because the sort of investment restrictions do not apply to certain things. I mean, there are contests, particularly in the technological area, but that is not something that you're discussing on the Belt and Road as such. That's why I stated very early that the Belt and Road, in terms of the building connectivity across countries, is a critical part of economic integration. And as long as we are in support of economic integration, I think the momentum for the Belt and Road should not slow down. In fact, you should be finding new sources of growth, and infrastructure investment properly done can be an important source of growth.
So you don't think geopolitics will have an impact?
No,
a negative impact?
It will certainly have an impact on the pace and on the international trading system. But I'm saying that precisely because it has an impact, it is important for us to push on, to look for projects which, as I mentioned, are economically viable, are bankable, and for which you have proper rules and regulations, proper legal contracts. And in that way, you can show to the world that these are projects that bring long-term benefits. We have to think long-term. And if you're thinking long-term, you should not let the current trade skirmishes end up affecting the longer-term objective of better integration for a better world.
Mr. Xu, I think we really need to strike a balance all our lives, actually. We have to strive for that goal. So what is the relationship between the theory or whatever you say with actions? How do you implement what you say, be it economically or politically? Or we always have to strike this balance. We need to act on what we say, and we always have to find the best approach to implement what we say. So could you please say a few words about it?
The Chinese and the U.S. Now the trading, the conflict is still, I think it should have the negative, the influence. I read the whole world pay more attention watching about what is going on in the future. So, but I think we should have the confidence. The world is going the forward still. So no matter what something had happened, even in China, so the 40 years the open up, so we have the more successful, and we have the cooperation with a lot of the countries, like the president, so the Chinese, and this is the good friends, not only for these countries, or all of the countries, even with the Swiss. So thank you very much. Have the confidence.
Yes. Confidence is very important. It's true.
But we're not golden touch, so we need to pay more attention and work hard. So.
Mr. Wang, I would like to ask, what's your take on this geopolitical context and their impact on the questions that have been raised? In the future Belt and Road Initiative, will it accelerate? Will it incite more participation, or will they drive the other way? From an entrepreneur's perspective, business perspective, how do you look at this?
The international economic context has become more complex. However, knowing the confidence that business owners have in China, they're still very passionate, they're still very optimistic, just as the Chinese government said. The door will only open wider. We will not stop our pace of opening and reform, and of course we want to encourage our business owners to walk out. We also want to welcome business owners from other parts of the world to come to China. The second half of this year, we're going to host the Belt and Road Initiative Forum. We will host different seminars and summits that will invite all business owners and entrepreneurs to this forum to discuss important subject matters. And I would like to extend my invitation to all of you.
Key word. What would that be, Mr. Minister? A key word.
cooperate.
Okay, Mr. Xu.
United together.
Mr. Wang, Wang 先生。
大的机会。
Opportunities.
The mutual benefit.
Mutual benefits. Voila. We had a good discussion. Thank you so much. The four gentlemen sitting over there, and certainly every one of you providing us with the intellectual wisdom. Really appreciate it. 谢谢大家。